Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Expanding Forward radio show. Conversations about juicy living. With your host, Carole Lewitsky.
Welcome, everyone, to the Expanding Forward radio show. I am your host, Carole Lewitsky, and I'm so excited for today's show. This is a call-in show, so if you'd like to call in, that number is 657-383-0934. And if you're listening online, the chat room is open, so feel free to comment or ask questions. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, you can go to blogtalkradio.com/expanding forward and sign up for show reminders to catch the show live for future episodes. You can also connect with us on Facebook at Expanding Forward or contact me directly at carole@lewitsky.com. Our topic today, it's a doozy, is awakening schizophrenia. Why do we keep going in and out of our flow? The very first time I had heard that expression, I just loved it immediately, and I had heard it from one of my favorite teachers, Jennifer Huff. And to hear it expressed that way really resonated with me because I just could relate. I had been going through so many changes the years prior to meeting her, and some days I felt one way, the next day I felt the opposite, or sometimes it was a whole week I felt so sure about something, and then the next week I felt different. And then it could be even more extreme where I had believed something for so many years, and then now I didn't believe it anymore. And so it left me unsettled and wondering what the heck, like which one is true, which one is me, which one is how I really feel, and how could I believe something so solid at one time and then believe the opposite. And so, of course, it had crossed my mind, like, is this schizophrenia? Like, what's going on? And to hear it said in an expression like that, awakening schizophrenia, I guess it gave me some comfort just knowing that if someone had made something like that up, surely there were others that were feeling the same way. And there's just something to feeling like you're normal. Sometimes we just want to know we're not alone. So, it can help eliminate the fear that comes with not understanding something when we're going through it. So I was on Facebook earlier this morning and came across a quote, and well, it just so happens to be some poetry from our guest today, Jacob Nordby. I'm just going to warn you that his poetry is totally addictive once you start reading it. I love his stuff. It just resonates for me on such a deep level. And so anyways, here goes. This is how it went. Oh, traveler, the question is not if you will journey in this life, for everyone must. The only question worth considering is whether or not your curiosity is powerful enough to keep asking, and if you have the courage to allow the answers you find to change your life. Oh, that hit me. It hit me for so many reasons. So first of all, I like that he starts with, oh, traveler, because, well, I was traveling as of late. I've been traveling quite a bit for the last couple of years, I have to say. But I just came back yesterday from a trip with my husband and 4 older kids. And traveling for me is unique because, and maybe I'm sure there's others out there that feel this way too, but I see it more than just getting on a plane and going somewhere for a purpose, like relaxing or having some fun. It starts for me the second I say yes to the trip. And even if it's not intended as I'm going with this spiritual group and it's going to be a very powerful trip. No, even a trip with my husband and 4 older kids, I knew going into it that it would be something big, but I wasn't maybe as prepared as I thought it would be for me. So I felt like this was a yes. We booked the trip, and lo and behold, within weeks or within days, fears started surfacing for me. and anxiety. And so all the month of January, I was all of a sudden feeling stuff I haven't felt in years. I was taking forever to fall asleep at night. And then I'd wake up in the night and I had like this tight feeling in my stomach, like not able to put my finger on exactly what was going on and why I was feeling the way I was, but enough to send me down the path of judging it, right? Like, what the heck? I'm so over anxiety. I know better. Why is it I help people that have anxiety? Like, why is this showing up again? And the universe has my back. Like, I always say that. The universe has my back. So why am I feeling so much fear around this? So the fear, I eventually, because I was able to talk myself into just being patient. I mean, at one point you don't have a choice. You have to just either keep fighting it or submit to it. And so I thought, well, just give it time. It'll become clear. I'll be shown what it is that I'm supposed to see. And so I started having conversations with my kids about it. And that's where clarity started coming through. I was able to start seeing that my role as a mother was coming up with this trip, that I was shifting as a person in my role as a mother towards them. And it was actually my 13-year-old son that said to me, you know, Mom, I think what this trip is for you is that you get to bring out that child, like that kid in you that just wants to come out and play and have fun and not have to be responsible to make sure that this one doesn't get hurt or that one doesn't fall off the boat, or because we're on a cruise. So it had crossed my mind that he would get crazy ideas, but you know, he was so right, because I wasn't bringing 2-year-olds, and my 16-year-old daughter said to me, we're old enough to know that there's consequences to our actions, so are you able to just let go of feeling responsible for us to that degree, and can we just have fun together? And so it was a really eye-opening conversation, or at least it started opening up for me. What I started seeing was such a big change in my life, is this identity I had taken on. I mean, obviously a necessary identity. If you have children, you have to be a mother. But to know that we're free to use that identity when it serves, but to also put it to the side when it's not necessary. That this trip was about me learning to lean in to this new relationship I have with them. And of course, fear would show up, because every time something is new and unfamiliar, it's scary, just because we don't know what it's going to look like. And so I got to ask myself the question, who am I now? And that became even more clear and even more tangible with my 20-year-old son, because as the days would unfold and I would watch him have fun and him play and him enjoy the experience, all 4 of them, but just him, because he's so big, he's a man, but I would just still see that little boy in his eyes that I took care of and I loved and I nurtured. And then I caught myself grieving, and then guess what? I caught myself judging that I would grieve such a thing. Grieve that he's not that little boy that's going to run to me with his owie on his skin knee and needing my healing kiss of a mother to make it all better. But and so I would think, well, just be happy. You can be his friend now. You can just have a companion on your journey of life, that this is like a new shift in your relationship altogether. But what I want to mention is that we can't skip steps. Like there is a grieving process involved, and the more we resist it, the more it's accentuated, the more it comes out, and it becomes louder, probably to get our attention, to say, no, let yourself feel what you need to feel. You're grieving that part of your life that has come to an end with him. I mean, I still have others that I could still kiss their owies, but you know, it was interesting to see how I wanted to just skip some steps. And that's what I want to talk with Jacob and with all of you today about, is why do we insist on skipping steps? And of course, it's evident that it's because of the discomfort it creates for us. And so that was something I needed to look at. That was something I needed to honor myself enough to let myself feel what I needed to feel. And what does it look like when a certain role or identity shifts or gets stripped from us completely? We find ourselves so seemingly bare and unfamiliar in that new space, and that can be very scary. And I thought I knew who I was, but who am I really? Who am I really when I take away the roles, when I take away the identities? And so that's where the schizophrenic feelings come from. And so I think this is where I'd like to bring on Jacob, because there's a lot for us to chat between the two of us. I have to again say that Jacob is my favorite poet, and he is the one that has inspired me on many levels, but in particular as a writer, he brought that out in me, something that I knew deep down that I always was, but I never was acknowledging it on the outside. So that's been a very exciting thing for me to discover about myself. And so Jacob is the author and co-author of several books, including The Divine Arsonist, A Tale of Awakening, Pearls of Wisdom with Jack Canfield and others, The Thought That Changed My Life Forever with Dr. Bernie Siegel and others, and will soon release Blessed Are the Weird book, which I am so excited for the day. He leads a worldwide conversation with his Blessed Are the Weird People tribe and teaches the popular Creative Unboot Camp, a course for writers, which I've taken. I probably will take again because it's just so juicy and awesome and amazing. So please welcome the one and only Jacob Nordby.
Hey, Carole, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm just so happy that you're with us today. How have things been for you?
Oh, things are exciting and fascinating. As you know, it's so interesting to hear your talking about your own experiences lately, and I love that you're talking about the real stuff, the motherhood and the fears and the. You know, this is not theoretical. It's where all of this stuff hits the ground, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. It's when you get to put it all into practice, and how easy it is it for us to want to skip the process. Let's just go to the end prize. Like, there is an end anyways, but we tell ourselves that, right? Just to feel good
right.
about it.
Well, yeah, you know, I was sitting there looking at it's interesting. I woke up this morning thinking about this your show today, and by way of appreciation, you said some really nice things about me, and I thank you for that. And you know, when you asked me on several months ago, my initial feeling was just this immediate yes, because I appreciate very much your honesty and the journey you've taken so far, and everything you're up to, and the fact that you're willing to share that with people is it's a very big deal. And you know, I know you've shared with folks a lot about how things have unfolded for you and how you got started. But I just know, with the similarities in our background, I know what a rugged and difficult thing it can be to wake up and to experience all these things. And I particularly was interested in talking about the two words, awakening and schizophrenia, just for a few minutes. Are you good with that?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So schizophrenia is funny. For me, I actually looked it up for a second just to kind of fix it in my mind what that meant, and it actually made me laugh because it's so applicable to our topic today. They call it a mental disorder, but it's characterized by abnormal social behavior and a failure to understand reality.
Oh, that's
right.
Good.
Common symptoms include false beliefs, unclear or confused thinking, hearing voices, reduced social engagement.
I know nothing about that.
I know. I was sitting there reading this seriously laughing about it. I'm like, wow, I recognize all of those things. I wonder if I need some medication or something. Oh my God. So it's just a fascinating. So your choice of words is really interesting today. And you know, as I was thinking about it before I looked at the definition, though, so something happens as I'm going to keep using the word we, but in every case it's me as well. Something happens when there's this cracking open a shell of the conditioned idea, the self-concept, some people would call it. Here's who I am. This is my identity. This is how I live my life. These are the boundaries of the world. And whatever it is that happens that cracks that open, then there's this experience of the real self or the higher self, perhaps, the possibility of what could be if we were freer from all those conditioned thoughts. And what's interesting to me, Carole, is this schizophrenic sensation of having the old self, the identity we always knew, yammering along, jabbering about, don't do that, don't do this, be afraid of this. And then there's this other voice or voices that say, come along, come on this journey. Mm-hmm. Look what's possible. Look what's over here. Why don't you try this? And so the sense of schizophrenia, I mean, wow, that's really quite accurate, because we have an old self and a higher or a larger self, if whatever we want to call that, speaking often at the same time, and it can create a sense of chaos internally. Does that? I mean, I assume that makes sense to you.
You hit it right on the nose. Like it's exactly what it sounds like, and that's why it can be so disillusioning when you're experiencing it, because not a lot of people are maybe willing to talk about it exactly for the reasons you just said. You pull the definition out of the dictionary, and we should all be medicated by now. If we admit it out loud, it's like, exactly that. And then what makes it worse is if you think that all those voices are yours. Mm-hmm. That's mm-hmm. where it becomes dicey and dangerous, or at least where you don't tend to reach out to people about it, because you think they're all yours, because you think you start taking them all seriously, and if you do, then it's completely psychotic.
Well, yeah, and I'd like to look at the word awakening too, just for a second, because I mentioned it a moment ago. Like this sense of schizophrenia, and also or craziness or chaos or whatever we want to call that. But there's also that people get hung up on, I certainly did, the word awakening, and people who aren't, cool with the idea, they make a lot of assumptions about what it means, and people who are experiencing it or have experienced it sometimes get really focused on, enlightenment, or, an awakened person does this or that and all that stuff. And so I thought it'd be fun just to bring the term awakening down to more of a basic sense of, stripping off all the layers of sacred or mystical paint. What even is it?
For me, what that means is reawakening what always has been inside of us. And I want to make it very clear, because I think that's a misconception, that there is nowhere to get to. Like you talk about being the enlightened person, or there's just so much focus that can easily be put on a destination, like once I am awake, or that I am now, or that once I'm enlightened enough, this is what it'll look like. I won't get engaged anymore. I won't get triggered by things anymore. I won't be affected. I'll just be like zen, like all the time. And the trap with that is where it can become like an enlightenment Olympics, where it's like who's more than, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rather than just honoring each other's journey exactly where we're at as perfect, with there being no destination at all except right now. And so awakening for me is bringing back to life what at one point became dormant, when we're this little child that's completely carefree, loves life, knows without a shadow of a doubt that we're being taken care of in every single moment by this higher power or infinite wisdom or whatever it might be for you. At one point, fear sets in, or we get hurt, or we get taught that we need to be guarded or protect ourselves. And in that process, the true essence of who we are to a certain level becomes dormant.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
I think it's worth saying too. You know, I don't know if you've read this one, Carole, but Robert Anton Wilson wrote this fascinating book that really helped me out a lot back in the day, called Prometheus Rising. Have you noticed that one before?
No, I didn't, but I'll check it out.
It's a wild, wacky book, as the author is himself, and brilliant, really brilliant. But he talks a lot about imprinting and conditioning and social norms and family norms and everything, and the framework of how we create the concept of who we are. And interestingly enough, many people come out of the womb into an environment. So the womb itself, and of course we're learning more and more about the womb and epigenetics, and so what is even offered in that safe environment of the womb through the experiences of the mother, and the chemicals and even the thoughts. I mean, it's just fascinating how much we are learning in science now about how much is passed right into the unborn child. But then, so that's a whole other topic. But as soon as many people show up in the world, they come into an environment they're immediately imprinted with fear, with unworthiness, with shame, with the ideas of you're not good enough, and that's happening at an unconscious level. So by the time they become self-conscious, self-aware, they already have these programs running. And Tony Robbins, one of my early teachers, interestingly enough, it was him, not he, I guess is grammatically correct, who, without knowing it, introduced me to Wayne Dyer and Deepak Chopra years and years ago, and that took me from one section of the library to a whole other section of the library, and helped me open up my heart and mind to other possibilities as well. But he once said, perhaps the strongest need of the human psyche is to remain consistent with our own identity. Yeah, which is interesting. So we have this identity which is formed so early on, and some of us have the beautiful grace period of infancy and toddlerhood where we feel so cared for and supported, and that, and some people actually have that, and I did to a degree, but there was a lot that wasn't present like that there. But I've met people who had truly horrific experiences as infants. I mean, right as soon as they were born.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And they don't even know how to find that.
Right. It definitely can seem trickier in a situation like that. And I've worked with people who even from the womb were clearly unwanted, and were even told that as a child that they were unwanted by the parents. And even there's something further back in our DNA, like cellular knowing, beyond conception, that can be accessed with certain love and compassion and guidance, for sure. And the cool thing is that as we journey in our day-to-day, life is always there as our guide, and presenting situations and scenarios that will slowly invite us to reawaken that remembering of who we are, even if it goes as far as preconception. And so it's neat that way, and then we are still in the driver's seat as far as if we say yes to it or if we just delay, because essentially life will continue presenting scenarios to, again, invite us to the possibility of completely embracing who we are and who we came here to be. And so we can go through it kicking and screaming, or we can just dive in and say, I'm ready. But even diving in and saying I'm ready still brings up fears because it's unknown, it's unfamiliar, and it's a practiced skill where we're going back and forth to our old conditioned way of being, like you spoke of, to this new remembering of who we are. Like even on this trip with my kids, it's like I definitely was like the subservient mother, like the everyone can have and I'll take the least, and just making sure everyone's taken care of, and then as I step into my own and say, you know what, I'll pass on the crumbs. I'll actually have a piece myself. Like, let's all have a piece. And there's a part of me that just slips back to being like, okay, just taking care of everyone. And then, no, I'm going to just be a part of it. Like, so there's the schizophrenia too, of like going to the default of what's familiar to stepping into the new unfamiliar. And that applies in so many ways. I mean, I give examples of myself as a mother, but I wanted to kind of dig into your own experience, because my husband is just a few weeks before the trip got laid off from his job. And so talk about stepping into unfamiliar territory, right?
Wow.
The cool thing is that we both know without a doubt that we're being taken care of always. So we see it all as divinely planned and orchestrated, and that it will all work out. And so, but there's still human beings. There's like still fear that surface here and there. But for him to have been in a role in a position, a highly paid position, being the provider, like let's just talk about different roles that play into that. The provider, the main provider for the family, the hard worker, the responsible one, the breadwinner, the manager of a huge team, the guide, the one that everyone would turn to. And now it's like, okay, he's home, and he's being invited by life to maybe look at himself and say, who am I outside of all those roles? And I know you experienced, if I'm correct, you went through a period in your life where you were faced with similar, maybe you didn't get laid off, there's a different circumstances, but can you relate to a certain degree?
I laid myself off.
Well, there you go. But that's so much courage in and of itself. So tell us about that. What did that look like, and how did you have the courage to wake up every day and just look at this new phase of your life? And love to hear about that.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Wow. So, let me just talk a second about this whole awakening thing before I go there, because I can't help but be a little bit philosophical about it, and then I want to dive right into the okay, how did this work out kind of thing. So we've been talking about the imprinting and the conditioning and the framework of life as we know it, and so here's what kind of happened, Carole. In 2007, a young man who came to work for me invited me to go to a meditation retreat. Well, I hadn't learned how to meditate. I grew up in for those of your listeners who haven't met me before or whatever, I tell this story so often, I feel like, probably everyone already knows it. It's in this old news, but I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian cult, highly mind-controlled, behavior-controlled, so every single thing we did was, this is how you're supposed to do it. We had all the rules, and life was tidy and predictable as long as we stayed inside of certain lines. Over the course of years after I was a Sunday school teacher and all kinds of, high-profile things within this small group, I had to leave it, and it was harsh and difficult to leave it because it was very much leaving behind an entire way of life. But the questions that existed inside simply would not let me off the hook. They were questions that couldn't go unanswered in my life. And interestingly enough, back to what we were talking about before, you said life will serve up experiences, life will serve up invitations to remember, and that was exactly my experience. Because as a child, I would have these flashes of remembering, C.S. Lewis talks about them as flashes of pure northernness, where something from outside of his experience would break in, and he'd have this sense of bliss and remembering something, and he didn't know where it came from. And I remember that as a young child, I would have these wild, beautiful flashes of things that would happen in my life that I would have, and it was more of an experience rather than a thought or a visual. It was more of this like sense of freedom and power and joy. And it didn't fit with the life I was leading at all. And so I would run and try to talk with my father about these. And he was a very smart man, knew Hebrew and Greek and a lot about the Bible and things. But he had been a hippie, as had my mother. And so they had explored all sorts of expanded consciousness and drugs and everything else before I was born. In fact, the legend has it I was conceived in a coffee shack on the coast of Hawaii on one of the islands, and I'm sure they were as high as could be on LSD. But anyway, so there was something
well,
with DNA that
explains a lot, right?
right? But I didn't grow up with any of that, and they were terribly afraid of it because they had come back to the world and had found a safe place in religion that allowed them to kind of have some boundaries that made some sense. And so I'd run to my father and say, Dad, and I would explain something that I had experienced or thought, and I felt like he would understand, but then he would jump in and use the Bible and his ferocious, powerful intellect to just tear it apart. And I would walk away feeling really badly, like I had done something wrong. And so years and years later, as an adult in my mid-20s, when I eventually left that church, and I was just feeling completely lost. I didn't have anywhere to go next. I tried going to other churches, Catholic and Baptist and various ones, and just saying maybe there's another answer out there. And didn't find it, and wasn't okay with swallowing the next belief system whole, but there was still this sort of empty feeling inside, like I needed to be able to connect with Source at some level, in a way that would be free, but also provide that sense of direct connection. So years later, and I'd read all sorts of books, and Carole May's Sacred Contracts and Wayne Dyer and all these beautiful books. And they provided me with a sense of, okay, I'm definitely on a journey, and there's a certain level of inner peace that is emerging, but it didn't make any sense at all. So my schizophrenia that you talk about and the awakening thing lasted a really, really long time. It was this really slow process. But this young guy came to work for me in this big company I'd created with my brothers, which looked fantastic from the outside. We had a big, beautiful office, and we had, employees, and well respected in the community, and people thought that I really had all my stuff together very nicely. Oh, notice I didn't say use any profanity right there. That's kind of neat. I just want to give myself a little gold star.
Yes.
So anyway, this guy came and worked for me, and he actually showed up in the first chapter of my first book, and there really was a Luke who worked for me at the time, and he said, hey, would you like to go to this meditation retreat in McCall? And it's a mountain town a couple hours north of where I live here in Boise, Idaho. And I had this inner tug that said yes. I'd never really meditated much before, didn't know how to do it, but I knew that that's something I probably should learn. And so I said yes. And so that was going to happen in a couple of months. I didn't know why I had this tremendous sense of apprehension about it, though, Carole. Like there was something in me that said, whoa, what are you doing? And I knew, rationally speaking, that it wasn't about meditation, because that's supposed to be super peaceful and, basically sitting there and letting bliss happen, right? So I didn't know why I was afraid, but I was definitely afraid of this thing. And I started making all these, my rational mind started making all these jabbery excuses about why I shouldn't, take a weekend off from taking care of my kids, and why I shouldn't spend the money, and why the business needed me to stay put. And it was crazy, right? But I had all these monkey mind jabberings that said, don't go do this. Well, had I known, I would have understood why, because what was getting ready to happen was pretty crazy. So I rode up there with him, and we got there and walked in the front door of this beautiful cabin, and the first thing I saw was a wall hanging of the Hindu god Ganesh, the elephant god of protection. And there was incense in the air, and there were people walking around, mostly kind of down-to-earth folks, but I could tell it was like, oh boy, here we are. And of course, I rode up there with him, so I couldn't, leave. I was stuck. It turned out, Carole, to be a shamanic retreat, and I didn't know what a shaman. I didn't even know what a shaman was at the time, but it was so. There you have it. And the rest of that weekend was an exploration into the nature of myself, of ourselves together. And it took me, for the very first time, I experienced myself outside of the self, outside of all of the fear and guilt and shame that had characterized my life. And I remember during this, one of the experiences we had together, looking down at my entire life, everything that I had known up to that point, with such tremendous compassion and also like this tremendous laughter. That wasn't just me. It was like the laughter of the entire universe saying, isn't that a crazy little game you've been playing? And look how free you really are. And look how loved and how accepted and how beautiful and powerful you are. And then as I went floating back down into my body, and the life that I had built that was so heavy and painful, I didn't have any idea of how to take that tremendous sense of remembering, how to take that and actually live it out. And so that was probably the most dramatic experience of awakening, and the weirdest, and all those things. But that really was what cracked the egg for me, and I began to crawl out of that shell. And then after that was the schizophrenia and various things. I use that term not in the literal sense, but it certainly felt that way. So I've just kind of dumped the whole thing out. Go ahead and talk now.
Well, when you mentioned the schizophrenia and how you used to have it, and how I think it's important to mention that those feelings don't necessarily go away, in that, like, I notice myself still going back and forth, but the cool difference is that when you don't judge it anymore, when you can see it as that's just the natural process of things, then it eliminates the fear around it, or that there's something wrong with us, or that we're broken, needing fixing kind of thing. That we can just see it as that testing ground where we're trying on that newfound self again. And so, of course, it's going to take some practice. And the more we practice it, the more familiar it becomes, and then it can fade away. That feeling of back and forth can slowly fade away for that area, but then there's something else that'll show up, right? I think it's a lifelong process of just discovering on a deeper and deeper level who we truly are. And thank you for sharing that story. And I know that that's part of your book in Divine Arsonist, which I so thoroughly enjoyed, and I would recommend to any listener here. It's an amazing read, and you're just the master storyteller too. So it just feels like you get pulled right into the experience, as if I'm right there with you. So I know others that have read it and feel the same way. So, anyways, it's quite something. The whole seeing of what doesn't work for us anymore. Like, that's the kind of things you were shown, is like the laughter that came. That laughter was just saying, yeah, guess what? That's not part of you. That's just been donned as clothing, or like part of the identities or the roles or the conditioning or whatever we want to call it. It's who we are that's so unchanged in the scheme of that. And your experience almost has some similarities to stuff I've read of people that have had near death or like death, where they cross over and then come back to tell about it. It really does boil down to what you said, is just love and compassion, and just not taking it all so seriously. This really is a journey, and that's why I love how a lot of your quotes are addressed to the reader as like oh, like dear traveler, or like, because we really are all traveling on this journey called life, and there's no wrong way of traveling. There's just different ways, and then there's suboptimal ways and optimal ways and everything in between. But we're just trying to figure all that out, and in the process there is discomfort involved at times, and one of the questions we had put in preparing the show is like, can we avoid the discomfort? Is that something right? It's like we said, it's like one big sandwich with a whole bunch of condiments inside that are not necessarily that tasty at times. But
yeah.
Did we come here to avoid the discomfort, or did we come here to experience and feel it all? Is it all just sensations at the end of the day?
Well, yeah, look, here if we strip everything away, so I experienced this, shamanic adventure, and then bounced into, a lot of the new age experiences and groups and things like that, because it felt so safe, and it was excited. Like, all of a sudden, here's all this, there's a judgment-free zone, and here's these wonderful people, and there's all this rainbowy, amazing stuff, and it matches this. It seemed to match these experiences I'd had, and what's fascinating though is, underneath any possible trailhead into the natural self, all right? Because these trailheads all come with their own flavor, their own trappings, decorations, beliefs, ideas, stories. Carole, what's fascinating to me is that human beings, we occupy a funny little slice of awareness, consciousness on this planet. As best we can tell, no other creatures on this planet are meaning-seeking. So humans are meaning-seeking creatures. We tell stories about reality. And so what's funny to me is you take a Christianity story, or a Buddhist story, or a Hindu story, or an atheist story. I mean, you take any one of these different trailheads, and what happens over time is usually there was somebody had a really powerful mystical experience, let's say a Jesus Christ or a Buddha, or any one of these ones we can mention. They had a really powerful mystical experience and came back and sought to tell about it. And then people, who were also hungry for meaning in their lives, would attach to that story, and then the story would grow and grow and grow, and there'd become a lot of weight around it, which in most cases really wasn't what the original storyteller was even trying to say.
Right.
And so what I find fascinating is, one thing that life has offered me since then is this experience of always breaking down the story that I was involved in at the moment. Life kept asking me to keep going. And so I had some experiences with the new spirituality, the new age, some would call it, that were really painful and difficult. And I discovered that there was as much judgment and dogma and trappings and weight about that as there was in previous religions I'd been part of. And I was heartbroken, Carole. I was really heartbroken to discover that. I thought that I had found a new safe place. And so but I view that as a tremendous gift, because what happened, and this was then the summer of 2010, and I had just started writing this book, and I was still just so broken and tender and wide open and all this stuff. I had some pretty harsh experiences with the New Age movement, if you want to call it that, and I was cast out into what I would call now, looking back, kind of in the hero's journey with Joseph Campbell. That's kind of the dark night of the soul, or the abyss, where nothing is left. No points of reference are left to say, this is safe. And there really is a sense of tremendous depression and fear. Like, I thought I had a new safe place to call home, and I don't. So who am I? What makes sense? Is there any up there? Up? Which way is up? Is there even an up there? And where do I go from here? And what I discovered during that period of time, Carole, was minus any support from the outside world, there is a core there is a core remembering, even if I have to let go of every possible belief, every dearly held, even brand new little treasured idea of what reality is and how I might live in this world, even minus all of that, there is that core that I can never lose. It was never lost to begin with. I don't have to go anywhere to find it. I don't have to say any special mantra or learn any special, movements or do anything, wear any special clothes. It's always there. And that became this rock solid core of knowing beyond belief, beyond ideas about it. That then became a guiding light. And I'm tremendously grateful that happened, because had I not gotten kicked out of some of the New Age tribes that I found so beautiful and wonderful, I would have stayed stuck with a bunch of new practices that would have been merely a different form of religion. Does this make sense?
Absolutely. I think that's just so powerful what you just said. It's incredible to give hope to anyone and everyone that what you said, that there is a core remembering, and that you can see through your experiences and the situations that were placed on your path, that you were not a victim of being ostracized or removed from a group that you had found solace and refuge in, that this was actually a gift from the universe to show you that beyond all of that, we don't need any attachments to any of it, because all that we need is inside of us. And yes, we need each other as human beings, of course, for love and all of that, but the core remembering is not reliant on those around us or organizations or groups or feelings of belonging. The core remembering is at the core of our essence, essentially.
Well, yeah, and anything that we take on, so people, when I say people, I include myself in that group. I've stopped doing this largely now, but sometimes still get tempted to do it. People take on practices of, they go, okay, I feel lost, so I'm going to find something that feels like it can give me direction. And so they jump in and they take on practices of a new group, because look, that's if we strip off all of the sacred paint and we get down to the core of what we're really trying to accomplish here, we want to feel certain. We want human beings. We want a meaning. We want to feel like we have meaning. That there is a meaning to the pain or even the pleasure of life. But we usually aren't that worried about the pleasure. That kind of takes care of itself. If we're feeling good, we usually don't question that. But we want to know. Viktor Frankl said, and by the way, that was one of the books that really helped me back during that time.
I read that one too.
Yeah, Man's Search for Meaning. It was brilliant. And when you strip everything down to the bare wire of humanity, he said a person can withstand almost any what, so long as they have a why. So if they feel that there's some meaning for their suffering, they can put up with almost any kind of pain. It's when we no longer even feel like we know what the meaning might be behind it that we feel really, really terrified. And maybe this is never going to stop, and this is all that life is all about. And I feel like that's what the schizophrenia you talk about, and the reason we're having this show today, I feel like that's really probably one of the things we might sit with for a while here is, what if, or not what if so much, but when we feel like there isn't any meaning to the chaos and confusion and perhaps depression and suffering we're going through, understanding that there is something beneath that. And if we can hold on to the sense that there is a purpose here, but I don't need to necessarily tell a story about what the purpose is. I don't necessarily have to go out and get a past life reading or consult something that's going to make up a meaning for this. And by the way, I find tremendous fascination with all these different ways of approaching. And so I'm not making fun of past life reading.
No, I
get
that.
Fascinating experiences that are deeply relevant to my life. So certainly not making fun of any of this. Yeah.
No, I get that. It's there's a purpose for for all of it, and yet, and I love that you quote from the book, A Man's Search for Meaning, because if anyone would know, he was a perfect testimonial for a situation that would have brought many in despair, and complete despair, and yet just having and knowing that there is deeper purpose. And so how do you find that in your own life? Like on a day-to-day, how do you create a space that opens the possibilities to show up so that you can feel the meaning in your own life? Does it have to be this big epic, like, here I am and I'm changing the world? Or
Wow, that's interesting you asked that. You know, it's funny. I don't think I'm alone in this. I'd like to think that I weren't at least. But the sense of, I think what happens with a lot of people, upon cracking open into this sense of wonder about the greater self, a lot of people then get a sort of messianic, prophetic, I have a message that the world needs to hear very, very badly, because we all need to wake up to this amazing experience, right? And so I certainly experienced that. Like, oh my God, if everyone could just know how amazing we are and how beautiful life is and all these things, then we'd quit having wars and we'd quit, doing all this stupid stuff that we do on this planet. We'd live these beautiful, amazing, all this stuff. And so I went racing out to try to share that. And what happened then, of course, was, I had some of those harsh experiences, and it knocked me off my rainbowy, puffy little cloud. And I had to crawl along on the ground for a while. And what came from that, though, Carole, and actually this was happening during the process of writing my first book. And at the end of the book, one of the fascinating things that happened for the main character, which was happening for me, and of course the book is fiction, but many of the experiences were happening for me in real time, was that the real message that the guides gave the main character was, the greatest gift you can give the world is to wake up and then walk in love, to go back to your own life and walk with this unfolding sense of life, of being alive, of opening your heart, of loving this present moment. What I find these days is an almost complete lack of grabbing anything to believe as the new story. And I had to get comfortable with that over time, more and more. And just the sense that in this moment, so anytime I feel fear or uncertainty, and I do, probably on a daily basis, just a quick breath and a remembering of that who I really am is enough in this moment. Who I really am, the natural, unconditioned self that wants to express, that wants to be here, that chose to be here, is enough in this moment. And it's funny, that can be as simple as feeling really frustrated and angry, behind somebody at a green light who isn't going, and then myself wants to jump in and judge myself for feeling frustrated and angry, like you should be so much above that. Well, no, what I find, Carole, is more and more to acknowledge and embrace whatever is there right in that moment, not to pretend it isn't, not to pretend I shouldn't be feeling this or experiencing this or whatever, just to embrace it and say, wow, in this moment, I'm really feeling angry, or in this moment, I'm really feeling afraid, or in this moment, I'm really feeling shy and uncertain. When there's a condition.
And that defines love. Sorry to interrupt, but I love that you're giving that as an example, because we say, well, walk in love. Sometimes it can feel like just being kind and patient and everything that is pleasant. But what you just said, like getting ticked off at the person that's taking too long at while you're driving, And then having grace for yourself, being like, okay, I lost my cool. That is love in that moment, rather than jumping into judgment like you know better, like how can you be that way, and right? Like that's important to make note of that. Love comes in different ways, in unsuspecting ways. Compassion all the time, whether it's to others or to ourselves.
Yeah, what if I can just witness this fascinating creature known as Jacob with compassion? What if I can be curious about, wow, what are you experiencing right now? Like you just said it, and I love that you broke down the word love, because these words, love, God, they're so big and they're so weighted down with definitions. And so when we take off the label of the word love, underneath that for me is courage, and it's honesty, and there's so many raw words that happen underneath that when I take off the word love, because as you said, it's too easy to kind of keep that all floaty and feels good and it's nice and it's always pleasant, always has a smile on its face, always all of these things. And I've come to understand, Carole, that love in its rawest sense, is oftentimes not comfortable. And in fact, honesty, like if I'm merely honest about how I'm feeling in this moment, really honest, that's the highest form of love I can give myself and to anyone around me. Right? So
oh my gosh, like you couldn't be like so bang on that one. And that's been coming up a lot for me, and came up during the trip as well, because I went into that trip with an understanding, and I had conversations with my family about it, that I would be allocating like a certain period in the day for myself, that as much as I would want to spend every waking minute with them, that I would be honoring myself, and I would be doing some writing while I'm on the ship, because like how inspiring of a space to just sit there and write. But the trip started, and I got pulled into the excitement, and then I got pulled into wanting to not miss out on anything, and pulled into like, what if I feel guilty if I'm away from them while there? Like, will they feel like I'm choosing that over them? And so I didn't honor myself, and 5 days went by, and I got sicker than sick. That one night I just was completely bedridden, and through the night was purging, let's just put it that way. And I saw a few things flash before my eyes. It was a bit of a shamanic experience.
Right?
And so, but truthfully, like I saw things. It was like, okay, if you don't do it for yourself, it's going to happen for you. And but it's like that 2x4 upside your head, right? If you just don't, it can be such a gentle process, but if we resist it, it'll still show up. It'll just show up in a dramatic way. And so I slept for like the next 22 hours, like got up just to make sure I was putting fluids into my body. And I also saw that it's all perfect, because I did need that time. It could have been spread out more evenly, and it didn't need to be so aggressive to make the point. But in the end, I still got my me time. Like I still got to spend time with myself in reflection and meditation, and it was really like so much was shown to me on this trip. Like there was fear that came up, because it was a lot rockier than we had told, like at some point than we had been told it would be. And as much as we were in like the biggest cruise ship in the world, apparently, what a joke in the grand scheme of things. Like you look at the size of the ocean, it's like we're a speck of dust. Like we're still at the mercy of nature and of this massive sea that surrounds us. And it just got me thinking about life and how we really are on this journey where we just have to we don't have to, but if we completely allow ourselves to be in the flow of life, whether we're being tossed back and forth, whether it's fluid, whatever it may feel like, if it's comfortable, if it's uncomfortable, if we can let ourselves feel it all without judgment and with grace, then it happens the way it'll happen. Mm-hmm. Or the other option is to resist it, to go kicking and screaming. It'll still happen and play out exactly the same way. So we can live in, right? Like I could live in the anxiety of the potential like collapsing of our boat and sinking and us dying and leaving 4 of our kids like orphans. Or I could just let it be what it's going to be and enjoy the ride best I can for however it's going to feel. When we don't judge all the emotions that come up, it's amazing how depression doesn't feel that heavy anymore. It's still depression, it's still anxiety, it's still fear, but it completely tones down the intensity of all those emotions because you know that it's all playing out perfectly as it should.
Exactly. No. Well, you know, it's funny, and even when a dear friend of mine, Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., so the son of the guy who wrote the 4 Agreements. Yeah. I work for the publisher who's releasing, has released the son's books, 5 Levels of Attachment and Living a Life of Awareness, and then his newest book is coming out in May, and it's called The Mastery of Self, a Toltec Guide to Personal Freedom, and it's just beautiful. I'm so excited about this book because I love that. I was on some kind of a call recently with Miguel, and he said, people can read the 4 Agreements. He said, my father's beautiful book, and it's changed so many people's lives and touched people. And he said, but they can use the 4 Agreements, and they can use the 4 Agreements to beat themselves, to judge themselves. Right? And he said it just becomes yet another, and he said that was never the intent. But I love that he is taking that wisdom and he's moving it forward in his own life, in his own teaching. And the thing I love so much about the Toltecs, is that they have this tremendous awareness that life, in fact, the word Toltec means artist. And so they teach that we all are together having this dream of the world, and that each of us is dreaming, and that, right now there are over 7 billion dreamers on this planet, and that all of our individual dreams combine to create a dream of the planet. Well, right now, it's a fascinating dream that includes wars and poverty and terrorists, and it also includes, beautiful music and amazing stuff. And he said, there's nothing wrong with the dream we're having together, but the more we understand, the more we wake up to, now we're using that word awakening again, the more we wake up to the fact that there is a dreamer that is dreaming a dream. The more we wake up to that, and the more we take back the power from this unconscious dream in our own lives, in my own life, the more I take it back in there and say, I get to have the dream that I choose. Mm-hmm. I can't control the dream that we're all having together because that's dependent on 7 billion other people dreaming. But I get to have the dream that I choose. I have the ability to paint on this canvas of my life. Mm-hmm. And I am the artist, the I that is behind all the conditioning, everything else. And they talk about domestication, which is the system of reward and punishment so that we behave in certain ways. And it's through every single relationship we have out there, between couples, between governments and citizens, between employers and employees, at school, at work, everywhere we go, there's domestication. And there's this raw, undomesticated self, Carole, that is here to experience life through us, through me, through you. It plays in this process of how much am I willing to be domesticated? Which leashes am I willing to wear? And I just have discovered for myself over time that it's not that I'm not willing to be limited, because the fact is this Jacob self is a limitation to the great soul self, if we want to use that word soul, the great unlimited eternal self, which has shown up as me, which includes my body, my hair color, my eye color, my fingerprints, and the mind that we get so, we speak ill of the mind and the ego and the personality as if there's something we should get rid of. And I talk to people who, in the spirituality world, and I say, do you realize that to try to get rid of the ego or the mind, to get rid of it, that's like saying we should cut off a finger or something. I mean, it's part of us. It's part of the package that I'm here as, and it's temporary.
Absolutely.
Like this awareness that the Jacob I know as myself right now is going to last about as long. So you look out at the ocean, you watch a wave rise up out of the ocean, and then it falls back down into the ocean, becomes one with the sea again. So this Jacob is going to last about as long as a wave that rises up and says, "Oh, hey, I'm here," and then it's going to go back into that vast sea. But the fact is, I am here to experience myself as this individual creature, and I use sort of maybe poetic language to describe that as I am a fingertip of God touching the earth, touching this place to feel it. And if I hold up my finger, and I'm doing it right now, I'm holding up my left finger and I'm looking at it, and there's a fingerprint which is absolutely unique to me. And so the more I can forgive myself for being here as this limited individual creature that's touching the ground, the more that I'm able to have the sensation of being here and of loving and of eating and of, doing all the things in my life and of creating something. And even with the understanding, Carole, that it's all temporary and it doesn't matter what I create while I'm here, the books I write, or if I were building buildings or pyramids or companies or governments or families or whatever it is, all of that's temporary. It doesn't matter. The biggest pyramid anyone can ever build in the grand scheme of things is a temporary thing. So it might last a few thousand years or 10,000 or whatever, but it's still going to vanish. And so it doesn't matter. The fact that it's temporary is part of the beauty of the experience of being here. And so what I've come to feel strongly is rather than fight against having an ego, rather than fight against having a rational mind, if those things are running the show, then it does make life very painful. But to understand that that is part of this package of who I am, my job now is to allow the I amness, the great soul self, which chose to be here as me, however that works out, to fully fill up all the cells of my humanity and the thoughts of being here and the sensations of being here. If I fill it up that way, wow, the lights get turned on in life in such a way that it becomes a rich, powerful experience in a way that it never could have been before.
Wow. And the freedom that comes with knowing that we can choose to engage to varying degrees how we will perceive the experience. Like you talk about, we won't be controlling the wave, but we'll be the one behind the driver's seat of how we perceive it, and then in the end choose the experience that we come here to have.
Well, yeah, and then it just allows me to play, then it allows me to relate. Okay, so there's this idea of relationship, and that we often think about like a marriage or a romantic relationship, but really it's my relationship to the world itself. And we put so much of our energy into the walls and the framework of a relationship rather than what it means to relate. So in other words, I get so focused on, let me build a relationship with my children or with my career or with another person, in a romantic sense. And that's always focused on this sort of rigid structure for what it's supposed to be, and put so much effort and energy into, let me build a relationship. And that's okay. Like that's part of what we do as humans, but just like we build houses to live in. But the fact is there's an alive being, awareness that lives inside of that. And frankly, a lot of times we find that relationships, that alive, curious, learning, experiencing creature has left that structure, and the structure is all that's left, and it's heavy and old and dead, and we can't figure out why there's so much separation between this. So maybe it's a marriage, and I've been through, having to end a marriage and it was really hard and painful and terrifying to do that. And I've watched, how things have unfolded for me and for my children and for my ex-wife and for all of us. And it's been fascinating. And for my brothers with the business that we built and watching them take that and move on to something beautiful and powerful for them. But this relating, so there's relationship versus relating. And so the more that I allow myself to wake up inside of my own life, the more I find that I can relate in a very real sense. Like you and I are doing that right this minute, Carole. So this isn't just some idea. You and I are having this relating experience, right?
Exactly.
And I'm listening to you, and of course you're listening. Yeah.
And that can be taken into every single scenario, every single encounter with other human beings, but also with nature, with everything that we set our eyes on, or just even like I find for traveling for me really does that, because it separates me from the responsibilities of everyday life and the pressures or the stress. And so when I'm away, those distractions are not there for me to take me away from what's right in front of me. So I'm able to just completely tune into, you talked about the wave, like how many times I sat on the side of the boat just watching like the peaks and then how fast it would go by. And exactly what you said, it's there for like a split second, and I get to experience that moment. And so I was like relating to the wave too, and how it felt like I was experiencing a kiss from eternity. Something so beyond us and so much bigger and inside of us. Like if I could experience it, it's because it's in me to begin with. And so it's not just when we're away to beautiful, exotic places in the world that we can experience that. That is really in every day, and what you and I co-create in this conversation, that can be experienced with a teller behind the counter. I mean, I watched my kids do it as well. We were in a restaurant at one point, and my son, who's my 19-year-old son, or 18, who's a server, was dissatisfied with the service at one point. And so he had one of two choices to make. He would either complain about it or take on the challenge of just, and he likes challenges. So he called on the head waiter, and he said to him, because in general it had been amazing. It was just in that moment he felt a bit neglected, like his water was low and he was feeling dehydrated. And so he said to the head waiter, I just want you to know that our server is exceptional. He's personable. He's kind. So he just went off, because I was like nervous as heck when he called this head waiter. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's he going to say? But he completely shifted that moment. He chose to experience it in the most loving, we talk about that, the most heart-opening way. And I know it was an experience or an experiment for him to see how it would play out. And sure enough, within seconds, the waiter was there and just serving, like just completely connected with us, with each and every one of us. And we became very good friends. By the end, it was sad to see him go. But it was really neat to watch that, because it reminded me that we can do that in all things, in all relationships, and everyone that crosses our path, we can choose to just, however it's going to play out is really on our way of relating to it. To ignore the beauty that's right in front of us. I mean, I come back here to Calgary, everything's brown. It's like our spring is not green. I'm hearing you talking about blossoms in your backyard in one of your posts. I'm like, are you joking? Is that for real? Not yet over here, but we don't have any snow. But I could easily see death all around me, but it's not. Everything is alive. Like everything is alive. And before the show, I just walk by the creek that's slowly starting to melt, and just the aliveness of the water and the rocks underneath, and even the cars passing by. That's life. That's like people going about their day. And just to grasp that and to see that and to feel that, that fuels my soul. And it's like, it's love in all little things.
Yeah, and this, I mean, you've just described what it is to be an artist in life, and that's without using paint, without, writing something necessarily or carving a sculpture or something. You're talking about the experience of living life awake and alive in this moment, understanding that if I learn to open my eyes and my ears and my senses, I can relate to the world right in front of me. I don't have to go somewhere else. I don't have to find another experience, although all the experiences are fine. I can relate in this moment, in this raw moment, to that person, like the story you told of your son with the waiter. Beautiful. And I've discovered what's funny to me is the product and the reward of getting more and more honest and more light and free is that life becomes so much more playful. I find that I get to, rather than relate to the cashier in the line at the grocery store as, okay, I'm just interacting with the outside of this person, with their uniform and with, how slow they are at scanning my milk and stuff. I get to relate to that inner creature of them who has children at home and has hopes and fears and dreams and probably likes to laugh and probably doesn't like being treated like a uniform all day long. And so when I do that, if I remember, I don't always remember to do that, but when I do that, if I just say something human to this person and they say something human back, all of a sudden I have this experience of relating in that moment that's raw and it's alive and it's fun. And even when it isn't fun, sometimes these things aren't. I've had a couple of interactions by email today that weren't fun. And that's the truth of it, too, is remembering that the raw and the beautiful and the ugly, like the brown you talked about in Calgary, these things are all part of this landscape. And to keep opening our eyes, to open my eyes, constantly do it. And, sometimes, Carole, people say, okay, well, can you please just tell me something, take something home to use? And I have a couple of simple things that I've found useful. Are you willing for me to share those?
I would love that. Definitely.
Okay, so probably the simplest thing that I've ever found that helps me get present again whenever I'm feeling uncertain, and just not sure where to take the next step, it's two questions. It's, what do I really want in this moment, not the rest of my life, not the big picture, not all that stuff. What do I really want right now? And what am I afraid of right now? And if I can just get clear, and that's a quick thing, I can go, oh wow, well, what I really want right now is, and I can answer that quickly, usually really quickly. And I'm talking about getting super honest about, in this moment right now, what do I want? Oh, I actually want this person I want to get the sense that they understand me. And what am I afraid of? Well, I'm afraid of, if I say what's really on my mind, that they're going to not understand me and they're going to turn away. They're going to walk away. They're not going to like me, whatever it is. Okay, so that's one example of it. Right. The more quickly I can admit it to myself first, this is what I want and this is what I'm afraid of, that brings me back to my center immediately. Okay, now I know right now, and that's not theory, that's right now, this is what I really care about, and this is what I'd like to feel, and this is what I'm afraid of. What I've also noticed, I was on a date with a lady I'm seeing, and we were sitting there having sushi, and I have this idea of what a smart, intelligent, attractive, funny man might do, and I was not feeling that way. I was feeling shy, Carole. And it would have been easier for me to try to keep putting on sort of a false patter and just overwhelm this situation with, being so dazzling and amazing and James Bondish when I wasn't feeling that at all. Okay, I was feeling shy.
Right.
And so what I did is I actually did a little practice with myself. I just admitted it. I said, I'm feeling a little bit shy right now. And we both laughed. And she said, well, that's funny because I am too. And we had this moment of honesty, and I got exactly what I wanted, which was just being understood and having a moment with someone. It was amazing. And so the more quickly I do that, and I do that with my children now over and over, I use that practice. Like, what I'm really afraid of here? I'm not afraid you're not going to figure this out. I had this conversation with my oldest son who's getting ready to go to college here in a few months. And, he's never left home. He's never, ventured out. He doesn't even drive a car right now. So I have a lot of fears as a father that maybe I've messed up in some way, but he's a very capable, intelligent young guy. And so I just admitted to him, I said, what I'm afraid of isn't that you're not going to figure it out. I'm afraid that I'm going to look like a bad dad because I didn't somehow insist that you follow the track that everyone else follows and
right.
Is all ready for the world in this way. And he laughed and said, Dad, I've got this, right? And I laughed and said, I do. So this isn't about me telling you how to do it. This is about me trying to make myself feel better. We both laughed. We had this honest conversation about that.
Wow, that's amazing, and I needed to hear that right now because I definitely, that's awesome. I'm gonna put that into practice more and more. You could just never be honest enough, right? And first and foremost, you start with yourself, and I think that's if you haven't been for many years, then it's something to practice and to be okay that you're gonna trip up, and that's all right too. Wow.
How fast can I? Yeah, I just want to make sure and say this because I say a lot of words and sometimes things get lost. So if it comes right down to it, when it comes to navigating times of uncertainty and depression and fear and exhilaration too, which is mixed in the middle of all of this stuff, like, oh my God, this is happening, and maybe I am waking up or whatever. I just keep finding that in terms of navigating, coming back to such a simple practice of how quickly can I admit to myself what I'm really feeling right now. And it doesn't require shoving it in everyone else's face, Carole, but I somebody gave me a phrase one time years and years ago, kind of before all the rest of this stuff started happening, but it changed my life then and it continues to. And the phrase is, if you feel it, say it gently. Yeah, he said that. He said, Jacob, if you can learn how to use this, if you feel it, say it gently. He said, now you're not going to have to learn how to say it gently. That's kind of what you do already. But he said, other people have to learn how to say it gently. He said, what you have to learn, Jacob, is you have to learn how to say it. He said, you're going to say it gently anyway. Just learn how to say it. And then, that by itself becomes this immediacy of admitting this is what's going on inside of me. The more I do that, then the closer I get to being to letting the raw, undomesticated, curious, interested artist self that is in me have expression in this world. And I want to say this one other thing real quickly. The shaman guy who, I met years ago and facilitated such an amazing experience for me. I had some other experiences with him later. And one time I was standing on the porch of a cabin we used to own, and we were watching a couple of turkey vultures circle high in the blue sky above us. And we were, having a ceremony inside, but we had taken a little break, and he and I were standing outside, Carole, and I once again was trying to unwind this life that I had built that was so heavy and didn't fit myself anymore. And so I asked him, I said, I used his name, and I said, I have all these things that are weighing me down, and I feel like I'm stuck in this great big spider's web that I have wound myself. But if I move toward what feels true to me, I'm going to mess up everybody around me. I'm going to mess their lives up, and it's going to really hurt them. And I said, I don't want to do that. I don't know how to put these things down without messing everyone's life up. And I was hoping for some tremendous wisdom and specific, ideas about what to do. And he kind of gazed up in the sky and watched the vultures for a while, and the moment stretched on and on and on. And I'm sitting there going, okay, well, this is really going to be good because he's taking a long time to think about it. Finally, he kind of looked back at me and he said, well, I think we should just ask Spirit to let things work out for the highest and best good of everyone concerned. And Carole, I was so frustrated by that. I'm like, that doesn't do anything for me. I was going back, in a day or two, was going to go back to an office that represented tremendous debt and obligation to my dear brothers and sisters who, had helped me build this company. I was going back to, a marriage that wasn't working. I was going back to all these things. I had no idea how to unwind that. And what's interesting is this process we've been talking about today of just getting more and more honest, as I allowed that to come out a step at a time, just a little at a time. And we can't, any of us do it all at once. We can't. And if we do, it's just going to really be painful. But what I've discovered in looking back now, I look back at that statement he made and the surrender that I was willing to allow more and more. And I look at all the lives around me, all these people I was so afraid for, because I really wasn't that afraid for myself. I was pretty sure I was going to be okay, that I could handle the pain. But I was so afraid. I felt so responsible for everyone around me. And of course, that was my own stuff. Wow, I didn't use profanity again. That was my own stuff. And that was really, it's been exciting to watch, though, that by letting go of my need to control their lives and by following the path that felt true ahead of me, what has unfolded has revealed itself to be the highest and best good for everyone. And that was without me trying to make that happen. I couldn't. It wasn't even up to me at all. So.
Well, you're right there when you say it isn't up to us. It's for us to just show up the best we can for ourselves and to really trust that it will play out perfectly for everyone involved, especially when you're walking into it with courage and honesty. It just can't go wrong. So I'm just going to say one last quote before we leave that I saw you post this morning by Jack Canfield. We need a warrior's heart. We need a warrior's heart that lets us face our lives directly, our pains and limitations, our joys and possibilities. So thank you so much, Jacob, for being with us today. I am so grateful. You really do inspire me, not only as a writer, but as a human being. I'm so excited about your upcoming book, Blessed Are the Weird. So please tell us before we go what's going on in your world and how can people reach you?
Well, I just want to say thank you for having a show with enough length that you just let me talk, and obviously I like to do that.
I could keep going. I could have kept going, but I don't want to.
Yeah, no, thank you for this, Carole. And thanks for asking. Blessed Are the Weird People book. So, let's see, what I would say is probably the easiest way would be to go to blessedaretheweird.com. That is sort of housed on my personal site, jacobnordby.com, and you can kind of follow the threads from there and find us on Facebook and find us places. But that's probably the easiest way. And I'd encourage everyone who is drawn to read that poem, because it also talks about embracing life's pain and pleasure and living. And I also want to say really more about you and about everyone who's listening. All of us. I really do feel so strongly that we are fellow travelers through this world, through this lifetime. And the fact that we're here, that our voices are connecting like this and connecting with everyone who listens, I don't see any path crossing with any fellow traveler as accidental. Carole, not mine with you, not ours with anyone who's listening, not theirs with the others. So we're part of this beautiful web of synchronicity and serendipity. And somehow, even though we may not be able to make sense of it all or create a meaning that will encompass everything, somehow we are here on this earth right now on time and on purpose. And so I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank all of us for being here. We really are a remarkable time.
Yeah. My heart's just wide open. Thank you. Thank you, Jacob, so much. Thank you to all our listeners. If you know anyone, family, or friends that you think would enjoy this call, I can't think of anyone that wouldn't. Just covered so many different topics and still stayed on topic, which is remarkable. Then feel free to pass on the link. The more people we get to understand and feel that they're not alone in this waking up process, the better our world can be. So thank you, Jacob, again, and everybody have a great rest of your day.